Today, the one and only Jason Blumber. In my eyes, kind of the community OG. He's been running Thrival for 15 years. This was a fun conversation with him, just picking his brain on like, what did you learn over 15 years of community running? What are your views on community now? Who it's good for, like the strategy for firm owners. Is this a thing I gotta engage with like every week, once a month? Do I go to conferences every year? Like, what's the best way to balance the fact that I got a job with like learning from other people who run firms as well? He had some really good wisdom on that stuff. So without further ado, here's Jason. Hope you like it. Let's do it. Jason, if there's anybody listening to this who has not bumped into you in the wild, what's like the 30-second intro of what they should know about you?
Been in our profession for about 30 years, a CPA, running a firm my dad started, a little bit. It's over 25 years. I've been running it 22 years, something like that. And Thrival, our community, is about 15 years old. And that's it.
That's it.
That's it.
You just got a bunch of kids out of the house.
Right. I'm a newly empty nester. So my third daughter, I have 3 daughters. My third daughter just went to university.
Well, if you ever want 3, you could swap in, even just for a weekend. Let me know.
Okay. No, I'm good. I'm liking the empty nest thing. This is kind of cool.
So this week on the pod, we're talking community stuff. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm sure there's always been a million versions of community back to, I don't know, Roman times.
Sure.
At the baths or something. When I was launching mine, like you were kind of the only one I had on my radar. And so I'm curious because a lot of folks look at my community and they're like, wow, what a novel idea. Where'd you come up with that? And I'm like, well, I just stole it from somebody else, like we've always done.
Like I did.
Right, yeah. So I'm curious, like, what was the advent of yours? Why did that need to be a thing? And why were you, the right person to will that into existence?
Yeah. Well, I may have started it similar to you. I was running a firm and like you, and you go, wow, I don't know what I'm doing. So yeah, you start bumping into people. I think I was on Twitter in 2009 and was just meeting some CPAs on Twitter. There were like 4 or 5 CPAs. And I'm like, can I call you? Because there's something I can't figure out about this online cloud payroll thing that we're all doing now. So just started, meeting people online. And then we went to some conferences together. It was like a handful of people. And then I'm like, I think I need to be with them more formally. And so I launched a community 15 years ago. I had no idea what that was. I knew Paul Dunn, if you've heard his name, is a co-author of Ron Baker. He started Results Accountants Network in Australia 30-ish years ago. So they had something similar, but it was a training program for accountants, teaching them to run businesses. And Paul Dunn's not an accountant, so he was teaching them how to do that. And so he had some things that came, like Rand One was a very old community that came into the U.S. and some other older ones. And some of those founders are in their 70s and 80s now. And I had started hearing about them through Ron Baker. So I think I had a sense that communities could be a thing. So really, it was free. I didn't know. I just like, can we all just hang out together? I didn't know that you put money on these things. That didn't work out later when I went, I think I need to have a price on this. And people were like, oh, that's not cool. And I'm like, yeah, I didn't realize that when I did this. So it just started on a LinkedIn group board. And it was really just to go, let's talk about what we're doing and figuring this out together. That's why we have communities. Like, we are way better together than by ourselves. We do not need to be alone. Good grief.
That's so funny. My community started from Twitter, from making friends on Twitter, and then from going to some conferences.
Yeah.
And
that's
you hear that thing of, you need to go to a conference or 2 a year because the experience you get talking with other people, like it's so transformational. And I came away from conferences and I'm like, man, I need this like shot into my veins every week.
All the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. All the time.
That's funny. That's like exactly how mine started.
That is a trip. Well, you start to meet people, and I guess you start to go, I want to be with them more often. I actually probably need to be with them more often. Because in those early stages of running a firm, man, you are screwing up stuff so fast. Yeah. And if you're pretty creative, I was pretty creative, always trying new things, not scared to ever try new things. So broke a lot of stuff.
This is a total tangent.
Yeah.
How has your relationship to like your appetite for trying new things evolved? Do you still break things? Like, are you still trying to reinvent the wheel constantly?
That has changed. That has changed a lot. So yeah, risk taking, we say in some of our programs, is a skill. It is a skill you learn. So early on, you just try a bunch of stuff. But as you get a lot of experience, your gut gets better, which is really just what your experience is. And you take risks in different ways. And so if your firm's more complicated, you have a bigger team, your family's growing, whatever, your appetite for risk changes because things are more complicated. So you can't, you run less on gut and you have to run more on data, and you just have to figure out when that time changes. And so you do change how you take risks, but we do teach you have to take risks as an entrepreneur. You don't have a choice to break into new markets, to test pricing, to try new, automations and software. So you don't have a choice to take risks, but you do get better at it. And so I don't do stupid things. I plan more and do things that seem scary, but they have a lot of planning behind them so that there's more opportunity for them to work out, because that's the goal. You want it to work out.
Yeah. I feel like my risk taking has gotten maybe narrower, and I think we have probably been exposed to an above average volume of seeing other people try things. And
yeah, that makes sense.
I suspect we might have, and this is kind of one of the biggest upsides of community, I think, is it's almost you develop a better gut. Yeah. You have a more refined gut that's been through more things, that maybe focuses that risk taking a little better.
You do. Yeah. Well, it's like, yeah. I mean, when you were first a parent, it's like, wow, those poor children, they survived their first few years. And then, later on, you kind of know what you're doing. With the third one, you ignore them a little bit more than the first one. I don't know. So it's just experience. Experience lets you know things better. But what you're supposed to do as an entrepreneur is, once you learn things, move past that and expand and try new things. So you're always kind of moving into places where you're not sure what you're doing. And I think that's one thing that's valuable in a community, because we tell people in our community, make sure you're never copying anybody, because somebody is always in a place that they've never been before. And so you always look at somebody and go, they have it figured out, which is really weird leading a community, because people go, well, how did Jason and Julie do it? We're like, do not copy us in this area. We are failing big time. So, but there's just funky perception. There's a real weird perception leading a community, but we have the same problems running our firm that every community member has. It's just weird.
So going back to kind of community 101, and a lot of the questions people asked me in the beginning that I'm sure they asked you as well, and it's probably the biggest question for folks that haven't explored community yet, is just the fundamental question: why does this need to exist? Because there is a Twitter and there is a LinkedIn and there are conferences. Like, why does that need a separate home from where you already hang out?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think communities have a leader that protects some of the values of why it exists. So, for example, if you join ours, you'll sign an NDA, confidentiality, and we're going to enforce that. So some people may have different types of conversations there in a community that they won't have in a public community, because a Twitter is like a community too. And of course, we know tax Twitter, and there's a lot of major benefit in those kind of communities. But when you get into a private one where you start to pay, you're paying for something in return, which is a little bit more protection. It's probably a little narrowing into a group of people that are more like-minded like you. So a tax Twitter is a broader community, which is good for broad topics. But what we focus on is really expanding firms around the 1 to 10 million. So they're hitting some super complicated levels of growth. And you need a little bit more narrowed mindset of people that are doing the same exact thing and running into the same walls, so you can pick their brain. And so if a community can form that that ecosystem of those types of like-minded people, it becomes more valuable. So there are reasons like, well, it's technology, you know. You can get some of what you need from some of your content, but boy, if you go into the community, into the realized community, the depth of what you get, the depth of how you're cared for, then that community starts to provide other people to kind of guide you through some of those questions more directly. You don't get those in broader online communities. There's nobody serving you. In a community, there's people set up to kind of provide services, so to speak, kind of like any business. So I don't know.
Yeah, interesting on that one. That's something that is kind of a tricky thing to navigate as a community runner and as the one that's kind of protecting that space is, do you ultimately, I'm curious your take on this, do you ultimately let vendors into that? Like, is there any overlap there, or do you have to keep that sacred?
Yeah, we keep them out. Yeah, and people who run communities know there's a balance between the vendor and sponsor relationship and your member community relationship. So it's a lot of the hard lines you take. For us, we'll never let a vendor or a sponsor inside of our community. That's not their space. It's not for them. That means some sponsors don't want to align with you, and you have, you have to say that's okay. Or sometimes people will give them what they want. But I think there's a lot of, this and you do this, there's a lot of authenticity to the community that you create. But it's not that it is for the firm owners. That's the only people it's for. And so, but we really find we do partner with sponsors because we really do need them for our conference. They really do make the economics of a conference possible, because you don't get rich building conferences if nobody knew that. We've been running ours for 14 years, and that you don't just get rich running a conference. So you have this whole sponsor side that funds some of that, so you can provide that community service. So no, we want to keep that real separate as much as we can.
This episode is brought to you in part by the fine folks at LiveFlow. I am a unapologetic lover of Notion. In fact, my whole personal and business life runs on Notion now. And the reason I like it is it's just a very open-ended tool for doing data and database stuff, but also narrative things like writing. If you're a Notion nerd, you get it, okay? LiveFlow's new financial dashboards are the closest thing I have seen to finance Notion, in terms of I can build open-ended narrative docs that I send to my clients with all the words and explainers that I want to include, but embedded with very real financial data from their QuickBooks or their Xero file. And I can publish these reports either as snapshots that are static and never change, or even publish continuously updating reports that are pulling in live data from the ledger. So as long as the accounting file is up to date, it continues syncing that stuff in. If that's a dashboard that the client looks at on their phone every morning, or a report they check in on every week. Super flexible reporting platform, not like this sort of pretty templatized, here are the 12 different types of reports you can present. It's totally open-ended. You can connect it back to anything in the accounting ledger. But because it's LiveFlow, they also give you a bunch of templates if you don't want to have to build it from scratch. It gives you a much easier way to get started. And that's why I like LiveFlow. Learn more, check out the link down in the show notes. This episode is sponsored in part by TeamUp, who helps you hire talented accountants in the Philippines directly. You're paying the humans to work for you. It's as simple as that. Something I had great success with. I had 4 folks working for me in the Philippines by the time I had sold my firm. Let me tell you the stuff that's just kicked off at TeamUp just this last week. A firm in Georgia looking for a senior accountant. They're turning to TeamUp. TeamUp then deploys their recruitments in the Philippines. They've got on-site recruiters there that are pulling in talented people. Gang, if you don't know, regional firms, Big Four, everybody has big old accounting offices in the Philippines. There are very talented folks over there. Another firm kicked off a search for a tax accountant. Oh, it's another one for a tax accountant. Just kicked off. Then another firm from Texas looking for a bookkeeper. I don't think I ever made any tax hires. I hired a bunch of folks for my cast team from the Philippines. But I don't know, there's this weird perception that offshore folks can only do the junior entry level stuff. No, anybody you can hire for, any role you can hire for in the US, you can also hire for in the Philippines. Made a ton of sense for me. If you haven't done it before, you're gonna have a bunch of embarrassing questions. Go to TeamUp. They've dealt with all this stuff before. Stop trying to figure it out yourself. There are 2 offshore staffing providers I promote in my content, and every time someone tells me they use them, I say, how did it go? And these 2 are still in my content because they're doing a great job for people. That's a better filter than I ever had when I was trying to make hires offshore. If you're thinking about it, check out Team Up down in the show notes. Yeah, that's a something still relatively unique to yours, where we've had online communities crop up that aren't yet doing much in the way of in-person stuff. And you've kind of got your Cornerstone annual event. How has that developed over the years, and what does that look like now?
Yeah, that did develop. So that it's weird. I think a lot the community drives a lot, or did drive a lot of the change early on. That had to stop, where we had to take and drive the value that we know they needed. But early on, they were like, "Wow, this is amazing. We're together." They'd never been in a community. Can we meet up somewhere? And we see that even in the broader communities, they do meet up, right? Because that's just where we all go. We're in this online virtual community. Can we be together in person? Because that's just so valuable. And so I think it was early on, they said, let's all meet together. And I said, okay, we'll do it. So I asked Ron Baker and Ed Kless to come speak, I guess 14 years ago at our first Steeper weekend. And that's like, I need 30 people. I'll split their fee by 30, and y'all are going to have to, well, there's rent and some barbecue. So if y'all will pay for it, then and they said, we'll do it. And I'm like, it's $500. They're like, we're in. I'm like, okay, you better pay me. Because if I get stuck with a barbecue bill, I'm screwed. I cannot afford it. So it just became that, and then you do it again, and then it becomes a bigger thing, and then you start marketing it differently. That stuff just grows, and you figure that out as it goes. And there was a point probably 4 or 5 years ago, it switched a little bit, where it was probably 60-70% of the attendees were community members, and now it's about 50-50.
Okay.
Where just the profession comes from all over the world. Now there are people that just always come from different parts of the world, mostly the U.S. and Canada, and then about 50% are in the community. So yeah, those kind of things change over time, which is interesting to see.
And you call it deeper weekend, which is kind of a loaded phrasing. What's the kind of the significance behind that?
Yeah, well. I think the first one was on a weekend, and then it's never been on a weekend before. So that's a big old fat joke.
So wait a minute. So it's literally, I thought it was like this woo-woo, like, hey, we're going to kumbaya, like that kind of deeper way. It's just because it went past the weekend?
Yeah, it's during the week. So
that's incredible.
Yeah, it's a big fat funny joke, and then eventually people just ignore that it's never been on a weekend. So, but it's.
I honest to goodness thought it was like a heartfelt kind of. No, it's just barbecue during the week.
Yeah, it's barbecue during the week. Yeah, so no, it's. I think we named it Deeper Weekend a long time ago, and what we did is we picked a topic. We went deep into that, so we still do that. We have a theme. And though there's not tracks or anything like that, we don't really have sponsor speakers. So that's kind of a thing we don't do. Though we do give them a little interview, part for the stage as part of their sponsorship. But we don't have speakers that are sponsors. We don't break a community up. So we have to have a venue where we get everybody in the room and they stay in the room together. Because then we carve out an hour or an hour and a half each day for them to break up and talk together. Because some of them, that's why they're really there. It's not just for speaking, they're for each other. And that's what they actually need, is to hear other people going through what they're going through. So I think the deeper comes from picking a theme and going just real deep into that. So there might be 5 to 6 teaching sessions of an hour each. And it's really 2 full days, and then like 3 dinners or parties at night. And so it's a lot to run, but we kind of have to spin up an events team, and my partner Julie knows how to do all that. And so it's pretty valuable. And so we just do a lot of surveys around what do they think's valuable. So we're always trying to change it and tweak it to make it more valuable for them to learn and grow and be challenged and feel supported.
Yeah, the excitement of being able to connect with the folks, especially the community folks that you've been hanging out with online all year, to be able to do that in person, like that's a really, like, you almost run the risk of getting in the way.
Oh, totally.
The fact that they just want to be together. And I think there's to some degree, there's some similar frustrations with just the way most conference programming is these days, where
Hmm.
a lot of people are like, I kind of just want to hang with my peeps, and like, what can we do to enable connection? Like, what have
Yeah.
you stumbled into programming wise that maybe other conferences could borrow from?
Yeah. I mean, we don't have that buttoned up perfectly, but that's something I think we'll probably always struggle with. Because there's going to be a mix of people going, if I'm paying to come, you have to teach me.
Yeah.
And they're never going to tell you how much. So you have to kind of figure out, well, I'm going to give you 4 sessions. And then some might say that's not enough teaching. And then sometimes, like this past year, we ended early. We used to go till like a 9 o'clock, but we ended it early. And people left and went to dinner downtown Greenville, South Carolina, where we hold it, which is a really kitschy, small, really up and coming city with a great, safe downtown and a park and rivers running through it, those kind of things. So we find they really enjoyed that, and we do that at conferences. You go find people and you go to dinner, and man, that is where stuff happens.
Yeah.
Outside of your conference at a restaurant somewhere. So we actually intentionally made space for that where we hadn't done it before. And maybe it's because I'm old, it just got earlier. Maybe we'll meet at a cafeteria at 4:30 one night for green beans or something and macaroni and that.
Right.
Because I got to go to bed. I got to go to bed.
9 p.m. that's incredible that you would get accountants out to engage with something until 9 p.m.
Yeah. Well, we moved it up, and people said, well, I like that. Glad you moved it up. Okay. So we cut it off at 8, and we said, leave the venue. We're closing it down. So
in-person stuff is gold.
Totally.
But to bring this full circle to kind of the origination of the community itself, where it's like, I need this in a shorter feedback loop. This can't be a once or twice a year thing. What do you think today, in an era where we have an abundance of places to hang out, from social media to communities and all of that, if you were advising, say, a 30-year-old person who just started their own firm, I think we would probably both say, like, as part of your personal growth stack, there needs to be some sort of feedback loop there of, how am I learning from other firm owners? How do you think people should approach that? Is that something where once a month they're carving out time? Is that something where every single week they're sitting with other firm owners? How would you balance that?
Well, we like to tell our Thrival members, because like y'all, we use a platform, I think Circle, maybe y'all use Circle. We use Circle platform, so it's something you can go into, and we say they're providing a lot of their own support by going in there and being with people. We would like them to be in there weekly. And we try to tell them a community commitment does take something from you. You're meant to get something from it, but you are meant to, but you're always going to get the lurkers who kind of read, some that respond. Then you get the 4 people that won't stop making posts. It's just that's how those things work. You kind of know those people by name, and you want a mix of all of that. And so we think weekly that's kind of the right interaction. But you know what? We also think that's a lot to ask people. So we say, if you're joining a community, it's kind of a serious commitment. It really can change you and help you grow. So hopefully you'll commit some of your calendar to it. And some people can and some can't. There are reasons why they can't all give that much time, but we want them to get the most out of it. We really do.
I think Zoom fatigue. We heard all about that during COVID, because that was kind of the only way that we had to interact with people. But I think I still hear that a lot, as folks will say, I don't need another virtual meeting commitment. And like, my head goes to, maybe the better question to ask is, how do I look at all of my commitments and chop the least valuable ones? Because it is so hard to just get people to show up and not be responding to emails and actually be engaged with a thing.
Yeah.
Do you struggle with that? How do you navigate that in 2024?
Probably the same way you do. There's a lot we do in our community, which means there's a lot we're asking them to sign up for. And I don't know. I think maybe we have the view sometimes we're like, we want you to have a lot of options to grow your firm. And sometimes I don't know what percentage they actually leverage of all of that stuff, which means for the community owner, what should I take away that stops distracting them from the things they should go to? super hard to know. Nobody knows that. So what's helped us is we have 3 levels, right? There's different things you can participate in 3 different levels. And it's, one's for the larger firms that are expanding and growing, creating complexity. And so they may need more education. A lot of times we find they, at 2-3 million in revenue, they have a team, a leadership team. Hopefully they're out of a lot of the technical things so they can commit to a lot of what our community is about, which is entrepreneurship, really. And so then they can have time to commit to more sophisticated programming and teaching, whereas the lower options of community, there's not as much to do, but they may not want as much or they may not need as much, and they can choose a different price point to kind of move into different ones. So
from a practical standpoint, so there's different levels, but for the average community goer, like, what does that look like? There's a platform obviously you can engage with and chat with folks and stuff like that. But by and large, is that something where folks are turning up on a Zoom a couple of times a month? Like, what does the normal routine look like?
Yeah, and a lot of communities may do this similarly. I don't know, but you join, you have access to everybody goes into the private space. And then we assign people to smaller groups, 10 to 15. We call those community groups, and they meet on a recurring date every month. So and that's bringing them together. So, the community is typing back and forth. The community group is virtual, but still on Zoom, but seeing faces back and forth. And then a couple of the levels get master classes, which are entrepreneurial, quarterly webinars that we build that are technically about how to construct and design firms, and from all kind of things, niching, hiring, all the things that we as firm owners go through. So a lot of them get that. And then some in the higher levels, they do get more in-person stuff. They pay more. So, but then you're always thinking, okay, they're going to love it because they really are in a narrow group, right? They're going to be like 30 or 40 people at their firm size, going through some kind of education that is really about what they need at their size. But then as a community owner, you're like, well, they're coming from California to the East Coast. They may need to choose that and not choose Deeper Weekend. And so you have to, in our minds, we have to start thinking what's right for us to offer that's not too much. But higher levels expect you to do more because you expect them to pay more. And so you give them more sophisticated education. And if you can do it in person, it's just always better in person. But
100%.
Yeah, it's 100%. But we have a lot of logistics around catering and events and spaces. And so we have to spin all that up, which we've built a lot of processes to do that very efficiently and kind of spin up some contractor event team to do that. And some share from our firm too. Some operational team come share into our Thrival and help spin some of that up, which is the help we do need because we're just small businesses,
Yeah, that's no small undertaking. This episode is sponsored in part by CoreV. Hey, we're closing up on year-end tax planning season, renewals. Oh, you want to get some better paying work? Buddy, tax advisory, that's where it at. CoreV, it is the most mature tax advisory platform out there. From identifying saving strategies for your clients to presenting them in a way that they will actually understand and pay you top dollar for, like framing the savings in a way that makes you look valuable, rather than just doing a whole bunch of work in like Planner CS or like BNA or something like that, and then just telling the client, here's what we did and here's the extension estimates. That's not framing your value up in a very positive way. CoreV, in my opinion, is like the most premium tool out there for doing this. And if you want to trade in the mill of just pumping out tax returns for something better, something more valuable, buddy, that is tax advisory, and software, the right software, is going to make that much easier for you. To learn more about CoreV, check out a link down in the show notes. This episode is sponsored in part by Makers Hub. Renewal season cross-sell alert. Bill pay. One of the things that is being changed the fastest by AI, regular old bill pay, but also like crazy technical bill pay. You got people that are doing like receiving inventory management. This is where like there's mountains of time savings to be had by getting into bill pay. It's actually a great way to specialize your firm, like differentiate you from other providers. If you're looking for a way to get a foot in the door with folks doing, manufacturing, anything that requires warehousing, having a service like this that you can crush and come in and get an immediate win with someone, especially as there's so much marketing hype around AI, if you can be the accounting firm that's like, man, AI is totally transforming this type of business, and our firm's gonna come in and show you how. Really cool opportunity. Makers Hub, more than anybody else I've seen, is leaning into AI vision models and large language models to push this stuff to a level that's never before been possible. If you're looking for a way to spice up renewal season, think about bill pay. I did it in my firm, led to actually a bunch of other great cash advisory services. Could be worth checking out. Learn more about Makers Hub. Check out the link down in the show notes. What is kind of the avatar of a firm that's a good fit for Thrival? Is it size? Is it service mix? Is it a combination of things?
Yeah, I think we did start. It's wild. It's followed us as owners, which I don't think we meant to do that on purpose. But as we expand our firm, we have 15 people in our firm. We're virtual. We teach a lot of the things we're going through, which they find valuable. Thrival started as really more of an emerging community. Just people. We would call them cliff jumpers. They would call themselves cliff jumpers. So it was people who had just jumped off the cliff and left another firm and went out on their own, or were just doing it on the side, and they needed that kind of support. It was a free community then, but it's just gone up market. So now we do need a fully focused entrepreneur that wants to grow and expand. So they're moving out of the technical service. We don't have private equity owned firms or anything like that. So the founder is the person we're teaching, or the owner, not necessarily the founder, the owner. And we want to see them in some kind of expansion mode. And that means they're adding team, adding revenue. And that's because that brings complexity to their life. It's hard when you expand a firm and grow it. It's really difficult. That's when you really run into a lot of growth ceilings and things like that. And so our community is built to solve some of those things, to really teach them around those things, coach them through it. So we need a full-time, fully focused entrepreneur that is in expansion. They're growing. And probably 1 to 10 million is going to be a sweet spot. And then Julie, my partner, and I, we do consulting for firms up to 15, 20 million. Okay. 3 or 4 engagements of consulting per year, which is and those are 1 to 2 year journeys. So those are pretty deep consulting engagements typically. So that's kind of the avatar probably.
Very cool. I imagine if your 15 years ago self could see what all of this has developed into, that's probably going to look pretty wild. Do you think someone's going to listen to this, and there's going to be people that are going to go out and do their own thing and see a version of community that they can't find that they need, and they create that space for somebody else? Mm-hmm. Do you think there was something? I mean, the answer here I think is really obvious, but how do you navigate that as a community runner? Like, what gives you the audacity in the beginning, and how much do you actually try to plan out every step of the way versus more create a home for a certain type of person? What would your advice be to even 15 years ago, Jason?
Well, probably at that time I would do it the same way, which you have no clue. You don't even know. I didn't know what a community was. Yeah. I was just trying to get some friends to not go home and be in a place where I could ask them questions. So I don't think, I just didn't technically know what a community was. And probably that's good. When you start a community, it's just a really passion-driven thing, because it's a real weird thing. It walks the line of a business, but it's totally not a business. And if you start driving it that way, a community members get that taste real fast. And they're like, nope, I am not a client. I am a community member. That's the label. So it's really a passion-driven thing initially. I imagine that's true for any community owner. The ones you see popping up, you're like, yep, they can't help it. They just have got to go start a community. But at some point there becomes economics where you do have to produce education and content, and you have to try to ask them to go into courses that support the mission that you're trying to accomplish. So I'd probably do it the same way. And it's probably best that you don't know what you're getting into.
Yeah.
And I don't know that you can plan. I don't know that there's a lot of planning around communities, because I don't know, at least for us, we have to really navigate our way through what do they want? Do they need this? Who are we for? Who's joining? Oh, why did they join? And so there's a lot of early years going, wait, why did that big firm just say they were interested? We've never had a
Mm.
firm that size. What do they think they could get here? Or what did they hear somebody say that they could get here that we're actually nervous that we can actually provide? So, yeah. So you fight imposter syndrome just like you do in any kind of endeavor you start or run.
Yeah, and if you're creating a space that doesn't exist, like if it has legs, it's because it's something new that a group of people need.
Yeah.
And you can't set out to run a templatized version of that looks like something else if it's for somebody totally different.
Yeah. Communities are not templates, right? That they are very bespoke places that are very unique. So that's a thing. You need to create something that's very unique. You can do that in a lot of ways by being in a certain, like we're only for startup firms that are a year old or younger.
Mm-hmm.
That's a beautiful community,
Yeah.
Or technology, or ours is very entrepreneurially focused. Like we want you to get your MBA. We want you to level up, become more sophisticated as an operator, basically. We would expect you to do that. And so we would expect you to take the courses. We would expect you to join and then actually go to the classes and learn. That's what we would want. Or we're not best for you because we're going to keep pushing you to do something you don't want to do. And that's not good for them or us. So.
All right. Last question I want to be sure to ask you.
Mm-hmm.
Get the old crystal ball out. Community. And so many things are called community now. And even the definition of, it's kind of an ambiguous thing.
Yeah.
Where do you see communities going? Like what do you think is the future of that? I think more people than ever before are coming online. I think there's a greater appetite for my little corner of the world and finding those people. Where do you see all that going?
Yeah, I guess I see communities even now because communities are becoming ubiquitous, right? They're all over the world. I'm seeing them all start to niche kind of, even the communities we all know, they do, if they're doing it right, they're kind of letting everybody know what they do very specifically. And it's weird. Communities, I don't know if it'll ever get this way, but communities don't compete for members. Because a lot of members are in multiple communities. A lot of people may not know that. So there's people in our community that are in Realize, and that's not uncommon because what you're doing is you're attracting the kind of people who want to learn that way. So they want to but they go to different communities because some communities provide things that others don't. So I think they're niching down a little bit. They're starting to, and it could be in services provided, or it could be the marketplace that they're serving, smaller firms, medium firms, larger firms. Maybe there's I think there are larger communities probably there are less communities or more training organizations for like even private backed or large firms. There are other communities that provide that, but they provide more training. It's a little less community. And we're kind of a mix where we do a good bit of training and teaching, but also community services too. So yeah, it's like they're niching down. It seems. I don't know if that's on purpose or what. What do you think that? What do you think?
Yeah, that's probably the biggest thing that I see is just greater specificity.
Yeah.
And the type of firm you want to run, potentially even the type of clients you want to serve.
Yeah.
You look upmarket and there is more shared services sort of things. And I don't know that we've seen a community go real hard on that for small firms so much. So maybe, I don't know, maybe you get some of that, but it'll be interesting to see. Like the most powerful thing I ever came upon was making friends that run accounting firms, and that little baby community that you start just by building those relationships. So I think whatever we can do to enable that for people is kind of the goal.
It is cool. Yeah. So yeah, we'll see. And then, our profession's very generational. So there's an older group exiting, and however they're doing that through private equity or whatever. So we're starting to run into a lot of those leaders who, that go, I really can't do anything with this business I built, and it's kind of hard on them. And they're still not big enough to have private equity be interested. So some of them, even in their 60s and 70s, are like, I've got to change it. I think there's a guy that would run it if I can stop doing it the way I've always done it. Yeah. So there's some change management happen with a large group that are kind of seeing I have to do something Or they're going to have to close the door and walk away, which is kind of sad. I think they're realizing that.
Yeah.
I don't know. We're kind of seeing that, but that might just be because we attract that kind of content or that kind of viewer, maybe. I don't know. It's interesting.
I think that's super common. I mean, everybody does a lot of M&A and looking at scoping out different firms, there's a really common template of just an unappealing firm right now where they're 5 years from retirement. And it's like the notion of changing all of this and getting the staff on board with a different way of working, like it's just not appealing.
Yeah. And I know that's hard. That's hard on some of them, but some of them are, I think they're going to try. I feel, it feels like they're at a wall and they don't have any choice because they, I don't know. We'll see. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Well, Jason, thank you for doing this.
Yeah.
We'll share all the links to Thrival and all that in the show notes. Any other places we ought to point people to find you online or anything like that?
Yeah, just, Thrival. Thrival.com is good. We put a lot of content on YouTube. Maybe if I can steal some of your subscribers, that would be good.
That's sure. I'll send you the email list.
But the thing is, they can subscribe to mine and yours at the same time and be subscribers.
Oh, that's how that works. Okay.
It'd be subscribers on 2 channels.
Okay. You can do that? Okay.
Listen, dude, I will give
Jason's
you a YouTube class.
Jason's got a great podcast.
Yeah.
Is it a podcast or is that what the YouTube content you're talking about?
Well, yeah, we have a podcast, the Thrivecast. We've had that for almost 15 years. That's crazy. We've had that podcast that long. So we've had that podcast for 15 years. They do put it on YouTube. And then I also produce just content, about running firms and the market and things like that too. So, and that all gets dumped on YouTube or, podcast aggregator. You can listen to it online too. So, yeah.
Okay. Cool. Thank you very much, Jason.
Thank you for having me, man. I appreciate it, Jason.
Take care.